Hello, everyone. This is Tim Selden from the Montessori Foundation, and this is Finding the Perfect Match, our weekly webcast on all things connected to marketing your school, handling admissions, dealing with families, finding the right match, um, building community, setting tuition, anything at all having to do with building the right school community for your school. We are the Montessori Foundation, but my colleague Clint Lausch and I are used to working with all kinds of schools. So if you're a parochial school, a preparatory school, a Jewish day school, whatever kind of school, we speak your language too, and we're happy to help. So whenever you see the word Montessori, just know that's kind of where that's my go-to frame of reference. But the things that we teach, frankly, are applicable to any kind of school. Clint, before we get started and start with this week's presentation, anything you want to share?
Geez, I feel like there's about 10 different things I always want to share, whether it's software related, marketing related, family alliance related. Um, but yeah, I would say, this time of year, I guess how we're working with schools is in two capacities, especially on with our Growth Suite software, which is all in one marketing admissions enrollment software, and then there's the marketing layer, the marketing services that are layered on top. So, as you're sitting there, probably the most common thing I'm hearing these days with schools is, we're trying to collect forms and do enrollment, and we've got all we're doing all these things in a lot of different platforms. So ultimately, if you're looking finally for an all-in-one that does it all for you, that's what our software does. So and it's called the Montessori Growth Suite, and we partnered with Montessori Compass also. They do the classroom management side. So you can always go to montessoricompass.com for to learn more about scheduling a demo and taking a look at the software.
And you could go to Montessori.org and look at we have a program with Clint where our consulting and Clint's software work together to help schools clarify their image, do marketing studies, run their marketing campaigns. And whether you're working with Montessori Compass or whether you're a Montessori school or a monastery school, it doesn't matter. We can help you make the phone ring, make the internet buzz, and build that enrollment. This week, we're going to be talking about a piece of the Montessori Family Alliance, which, if you are a Montessori school and you're not familiar with, I really encourage you to go to montessori.org. You'll see the menu for Montessori Family Alliance. Read all about it. Set yourself up a trial account. See if it's not something that you would really find invaluable. What we always say is a Montessori child can never be replaced. I would argue it doesn't matter whether it's a Montessori child or a child in a Christian school. The bottom line is our schools are based on families that love us for who we are, want to be with us, say really good things about us, and are all part of a community. And if you keep one child for 1 year longer in this crazy world, you have come ahead of the game. So the Montessori Family Alliance is an AI-driven library of resources, guide for how to parent your kid, everything from nutrition for the toddler to getting your toddler to go to sleep, understanding the Montessori creed. You wouldn't believe all the different things it will do. It is really amazing. There's never been anything like this before. And between that and 34 years worth of great content for parents, videos and webinars and all sorts of things we do for families. And the coming in July of an onboarding playbook that we're going to be carrying out with families and how to get your child through the summer, how to not lose a year's worth of progress during the summer, how to get ready for school, all those good things that are part of good education. Please check it out and see if it's something you want to join in on. Clint, anything more from you while I'm setting up our share?
No, I'd say fire away.
Okay, let me get to Canva and I will get to this week's topic. So many years ago, I learned the value of classroom and community meetings. Those of you who are familiar with Montessori know that ideally we meet with the parents of our each classroom once a month. This was part of the rules of a Montessori Children's House. I would argue this is good practice. I don't care what kind of school you're running. Not every parent wants to do this anymore. They don't want to go out at night. They'd much rather watch whatever reruns of Seinfeld or talk to their chat GPT or look at YouTube. But the bottom line is the idea of a regularly scheduled time when parents know that they can get together with other parents and with the people who are running their children's classrooms, running the school, and have an honest conversation every month matters. And while not every parent will participate, having that available is like knowing that your local hospital is open, knowing that your library is open, knowing that the traffic lights work. It changes the dynamics of a school. So we strongly recommend that you consider it if you don't already have these meetings. Now, again, during this seminar, please feel free. Just unmute, jump in, ask a question, make a statement, whatever you like, because we're happy to have a conversation. But this week, we're talking about community meetings in Montessori schools. Some of you know that I grew up at the Barry School, and we had community meetings every single month, even during the summer. Now, there were months where you might have only had 2 or 3 parents showing up. One of the things I learned from my parents was it didn't matter whether it was a big crowd or only 1 or 2 people. People needed to know that office hours were office hours and you were there, whether there was 1 parent there or 150 parents there. So the idea of community meetings is it's really, really important to be consistent. Get this to go to the next slide. So the philosophy behind it is that they encourage open communication and collaboration. We're looking for a strong sense of community and trust and a feeling that there is no secrets, that this isn't happening behind closed doors, that anything that they want to know, they can ask. It doesn't mean they're always going to get an answer, but that they don't need to sit there in the parking lot and whisper. Community meetings essentially are intended to be a circle of equals of parents, teachers, administrators, and most importantly, those students who are interested. Now, if you have a program that includes infants and toddlers, you're probably not going to see very many infants and toddlers that care. They may be there in their parents' arms, but they're probably not going to have much in the way of an opinion. I would suggest to you that a Montessori child of 3, 4, or 5 is just as likely to have an opinion about some things as a child of 6 or 12 or 15. So that doesn't mean they need to come, but it does mean that they are part of the community too. And a really good community includes all children who are interested. That doesn't mean they can run around and create havoc. It just means that if they want to sit there and be part of the circle, if they want to participate, they are welcome because their voice matters too. The objectives of the meeting are generally to allow the community to talk about what interests them. So while you as the head of school or the administrative team or the faculty may have specific things that you want to put on the agenda, so could any parent. This is different from a meeting that is called by the board of trustees, by the owners of the school, or by the head of school. This is a monthly meeting of the community, and you, as the administrator, are part of the community, but you're not the community. That doesn't mean you don't have the right to move something to the top of the agenda, because there are times when we've got something that's got to be discussed and we want to do it. In general, though, if we want to communicate news, probably we're going to do that in writing, as opposed to in the middle of a meeting where only some people are there. So the purpose of the meeting more often is going to be to discuss something that's already been told to the community, to allow them to have feedback and input. And so you might send out an email about, let's say, next year's tuition, or the decision to add on a middle school or a high school, or the decision that you're going to send a group of kids on a mission trip to Nigeria next year, and anyone in the middle school is welcome to participate. And you invite feedback and input and conversation about this with the family. It could just as easily be we're going to hold a jamboree, or we're going to hold a gala, or we're going to, I don't know, we're going to do whatever we're going to do. We're going to adopt a new mascot. Um, it can be anything at all, and anyone can contribute to the agenda. The agenda quite commonly is built in advance as a shared Google Drive document that where everything that is the latest rises to the top, and you have what's the topic, maybe some basic information about the topic so that people have some idea, and who is it that proposed this as an agenda item. So Tim Selden on May 25th suggests that we talk about starting a circus arts program at our school next year. That would be an example of an agenda. When you get to the meeting, the group can decide what from the list of things on the agenda do we want to talk about first. So the group decides. Now, as the head of school, you again may have something that is so vital that you need to ask for the group's understanding, because you need to have this talked about first. So the group decides on what is the topic they want to cover. Now, there's a number of ways to run these meetings today. It used to be they're always in person. Certainly, I think that in-person meetings work best. You may have such a large school that you may not be able to hold everyone in one room. If you do it, it should be like a Quaker meeting, a square or a circle. You could have multiple rows in the circle, although I personally like it so that everyone can see everyone and there aren't people sitting behind your back. It could be that you have to have a different meeting every month for different levels of the school. But in general, my advice is one meeting for the whole school. You're probably not going to get 100% attendance anyway. Again, the idea is those who want to, they come. Those who don't care, don't bother. Anyone who wants to could watch it either as a recording, or they could get the summary notes, or they could watch it online. So some meetings these days are being held in person. Some are being held only online. And it's interesting to see what time of night people do it. I've got schools that I join every month. They do it at 5:30 in the afternoon. I've got other schools that start at 8 o'clock at night local time. The other thing that's interesting is you can, as you can see in this illustration, you could have a blended meeting where there are people online and there are people who are there in the room. And you'll notice there's a white device next to the monitor. That is called an owl. An owl is one of the devices that people are using these days for blended meetings, because that owl swivels, which is why they call it an owl, and it points its camera and it points its microphone at whoever is speaking. And it really makes for a better meeting experience if you are doing remote professional development or having a remote meeting where some people as a group are sitting in a room and the other people are online. The next thing I want to tell you about is the roles that are typically held during a meeting. There is always a facilitator. This is the person who's like the chair, but they are not an elected officer of a standing group. They're not like a PTO where there's a president of the Parents Association. Facilitator is simply someone who knows what to do, has been trained to do it, and agrees to facilitate the meeting, like a traffic cop. The rule is the facilitator cannot engage in the conversation. They are there to listen, to make sure that everyone who wants to is heard, and to keep the conversation in order. By the way, that facilitator is typically helped by a process monitor. Process monitor just scanning the room, looking for people that are trying to get the facilitator's attention and noticing that someone looks really upset or looks like they're not getting the eye of the facilitator and points out, I think we got a problem here. And then there's a recorder or the scribe, and that is someone, and you can see there's someone standing there with a pen at a whiteboard. That is the person who is making notes. Now, those notes could be made in a Google Doc with a computer. They can be done on a series of whiteboard papers, and you may just paste them up around the room. But somebody needs to be taking notes of what was discussed and what agreements were made. Now, I want to make sure that everyone understands that these are not intended to replace a school's board or ownership. So if you're a for-profit school, you're not giving up any power by having these meetings. They are not a gripe session. That's not what these are. There are some ground rules. It is a place, though, where the community as a whole can get together every month. They can share information. They can discuss topics and they can plan. They can also ask questions of themselves, of the administration, of the faculty, or the board. They could also ask a question, of course, of the students. They could say to the students, well, what do you want as your end of year graduation trip or whatever? And the students may not be there. So you can ask a question of a group that is not fully there, and you may not get an answer right on the spot, but you are asking it formally, and the assumption is you will get a formal answer within the next month. The third thing you can do is you can express a suggestion or an opinion and expect, again, a response from the person to whom you asked the question or expressed the concern or opinion within a month. So, again, you can imagine a community meeting where they ask the head of school or they ask the board, would you, whatever, do X, Y, Z? The administrator may not be comfortable responding on the spot, but the agreement is I will get back to you formally by the next meeting, if not before. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I'm going to ask Clint, anyone that's online, do anyone have anything that you want to share? I'd love to know if you do anything like this at your school now.
No, but it's a tremendous idea.
Yeah, I think it really is, Jenny. I'll tell you a story about how we developed it. Many years ago, when my mom was beginning to run the school, she ran buses all over Washington, D.C. One afternoon, the wheel came off a bus and the bus rolled onto its side. All the children on the bus were taken to the hospital. No one was injured, as it turned out, but the authorities felt
Yeah.
that they all had to be checked out. This was a time when Washington, D.C. was segregated in African American and European neighborhoods. And this happened to be a bus in the African American neighborhood. Berry was a very integrated school. We had a lot of trust. However, when a bus goes over, trust goes out the window. Parents were very upset. My mom drove over to the hospital. She saw a group of really angry parents. They obviously didn't want to talk to her. What she did is she said to these people, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to stay there until morning. If any of you want to talk, you can call me or you can come to school. I'm going to be there. And I'm going to be there with coffee and donuts for anyone that wants to talk because I really want to know what's going on here. What happened? I promise you, when we know what happened, you will know what happened. By the way, it turned out that the people who changed the tires, because they rotate them, forgot to tighten the bolts and they came off and the wheel came off and the bus rolled over. So the story is that about at 12 o'clock, all the kids were dismissed from the hospital. By the way, that's when my mom said, I'm going to go back to school, when everyone was going home. And people started coming to the school and they sat around with her, how could this happen? What are you going to do to make sure it never happens? And she just sat there with them. And it gave her and those parents a real sense of comfort that she was willing to do that. So what happened was the next month she said, I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to every month on the third Thursday of the month, I'm going to from 6 o'clock at night till 9 o'clock at night, I'm going to have a meeting of the community. Anyone who wants to, you can come. And kids came, teachers came, parents came, all kinds of things were discussed. Ground rules were established. You can't go there and scream at people. You can't ask the administration to tell you why that teacher's no longer at school, because that's confidential. We can't talk about a family. We can't have your parent conference in front of the other parents. There are some ground rules. However, it is okay to come and talk, and there's a whole process. So it's basically founded on the idea of a Quaker meeting, where we sit there in the silence. Anyone who wants to can speak. Anyone can bring up any topic they want. It can lead to very mundane things like who's willing to help with the auction this month? To, do we need a parent association? What are your plans for teacher salaries next year? You name it. Anything can be talked about. And it gave the community a feeling that we were a circle of equals. We were really a community. Now, of course, you can also do this at the classroom level. It's very different from parent ed. This is not
Yeah,
where someone gives them a lecture.
we do it at classroom level. We
I
have
think
class meetings.
I think if you do that, you've already done the most important thing.
Yeah,
Classroom is vital, and so few schools do that. They
yeah,
might do it for parent ed, but parents want to talk.
yeah. Good idea. Thank you.
I think last week we also talked about that first meeting of the year where you have the new parent, where you do the back to school meeting where the teacher's got a clipboard of topics to cover and she is talking at the parents and the fathers are trying not to fall asleep and the mothers are frantically taking notes or going, hey, I know the answer to that. Um, One of the things we recommend again is don't do that kind of meeting. Instead, if you've got an agenda, put it up on the board or give everyone a sheet of paper. Say, here's a list of 100 questions. The parents typically want to know the answers to it as the year begins. Or these are the things that typically we want to be sure that all of you who are new, that you know, and all of you who are returning, that you remember. And some of you know the answers, some of you don't. This is the list. We may not get to all of them. These are important questions. Where do you want to start? And so Jenny says, well, what about drop off? Can we start with drop off? Sure. Jenny, let's start with drop off. And you might say, Amanda, you've been here for 2 years. Would you be willing to tell Jenny how we handle drop off in the morning? And so instead of you doing the talking, as much as you can, you get the group talking.
Yeah,
Just another way of
yeah,
making these meetings less boring.
yeah. Good. Thank you.
Anything else anyone wants to ask or say or share?
I, and I say this.
Don, is that you?
What? Can you hear me?
Yes, Don, we can hear you.
Okay. So we have a small middle school program, and we run obviously we run a community meeting in the middle school, and this stuff just seems very, very similar to it. Yeah. So what kind of ground come from that middle school meeting? You probably are familiar with. Move up to the adult community meeting.
I think what you're asking is if you've got a middle school, would they participate in these meetings?
Well, yeah, I would imagine that they would,
Mhm.
but you'd still have the classroom rules. But are the rules that you have for engagement pretty much the same that you would have in that middle school meeting?
Yeah. Again,
Okay,
the idea of acknowledgments, of grace and courtesy, of understanding that certain things can't really be talked about in the group for privacy reasons. So, for example, we don't do group therapy when we're having middle school daily class meetings. I mean, that's not the purpose. If two kids want to talk, they could talk in front of the group, but more typically, what you would do is say, it looks to me like you guys need a powwow. And do you want to do this in front of the whole group? Or would you like to do this in private? And so you're respecting the players. But if let's say a kid's upset with you, or a kid's parent is upset with you, that's not something you can do in front of the whole group.
right, yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, with the middle school, sometimes it does run because they'll put something on the agenda and all the rest of the kids will then
Yeah.
figure out, hey, I need to talk about that too.
Don't be surprised if you start doing this, if you don't see kids as young as 5 or younger wanting to talk.
Okay,
Now, usually they assume they're not welcome. So if they don't think they're really welcome, they won't volunteer. Besides which, the average kid doesn't want to sit for an hour or so. Um,
yeah,
but if they want to, for example, at Barry, when I was a kid in the 1950s, um, actually I started in the 40s, believe it or not. But as a elementary kid in the 50s, we wore, like many prep schools, we had blue blazers with the school crest and school tie and coat and tie, right? And as soon as I became head of school back in 1971, I dumped that. And then every year I would introduce a proposal. Bye, honey. Okay, I'll see you in a while. My wife is leaving to go out to an appointment. Um, so every month I would propose a motion that we go back to the uniform. Well, the kids knew I was going to do it, right? First meeting of the year, and they would all show up because they wanted to argue against that. And I would do it specifically to remind them that they had a voice. So, and all kinds of things. Well, I'll give you another example. At our lab school, the Newgate School in Sarasota, Florida, we had a young man who was graduating by the name of Ben Bogart. And Ben called me up about a week or so before graduation and said, "Am I the valedictorian of our class?" I said, "No, you're not the valedictorian. We don't have valedictorians in Montessori. You all give speeches." He said, "But I'm the valedictorian. I'm the smartest kid in the class, and my class agrees with me, and they're all in agreement." And I said, "That's great, man, but I'm sorry. We have this policy. And if you want to change this, this has to go before the whole school community." And it did. And he didn't get very far. The parents thought it was crazy. The elementary kids thought it was crazy. Once kids understood what a valedictorian was, they said, "Wait a minute, there's no way." So it's a great example of the kinds of things you can do.
yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll go back to presenting and going through the slideshow. And again, what you're going to get is a PDF of the slideshow. You're going to get an essay that I wrote about running these meetings that will elaborate on what I'm showing you. And I'll send you, of course, the video. And please interrupt at any time. Let me just find where this is. Huh, where's Canva? Here it is. Okay. So again, it's not a board meeting. That's very important. You may have a PTO at your school, and if you do, this is not the parent association. So there are again some ground rules. There can't be any issues that can't be discussed because of confidentiality. You must listen to each other. You cannot have a loudmouth mother or father or kid dominating the meeting. That's not okay. You cannot interrupt each other. It's also not a parent ed meeting. I'm all in favor of parent ed, but I want the group to decide on parent ed. So if they say, can we next month start our meeting, which starts at, let's say, 6:30, can we have a guest speaker talk to us for an hour and then do a half an hour of community meeting? As long as the group agrees to it, it's fine. Now, whoever is there on a particular month, that's the community. So if the community in September says, we would like parent ed in October, and would you please invite Dr. Steve Hughes to come and speak to us? Or Tim, would you speak to us about this? Or would the teachers speak to us about this? Then that's a decision that's made for the following meeting. The group that comes in October may say at the end of the meeting, that was not what we'd like to do next time. This is what we want to do next time. So the point is, it is a gathering of the community. They can decide what they want to do with their time. I do believe in starting on time and ending on time, which means you got to think about how long is it going to be and when is it going to be. I cannot tell you how many hundreds of schools I have participated in setting up the tradition of these monthly class and community meetings where they've gone on for hours arguing about what day of the month, what time of the day, what frequency are they going to have these meetings. Are they going to do them every other month? They can do them twice a month. Is the upper school going to have a different community meeting from the lower school? There's no wrong answer. The community decides for itself. We choose the topics again together. So normally what you've got is this long list of topics, which could be anything from next year's budget, starting teacher salary, a teacher left us mid-year. We have somebody in the classroom who is not a trained Montessori educator. How could you let that happen? What are you going to do to make sure it never happens? And so obviously you can have this whole conversation about what the reality of running a school is really like. The part of the goal of a community meeting is that parents begin to understand in greater depth what really goes into running a school without making them feel guilty. We're going to get very different perspectives, and we want to be flexible in our topics because sometimes the topics are going to be really inane, and sometimes they're going to be really, really, really serious. So just know that it'll change from moment to moment and week to week and month to month. We want these meetings to be consistent and we want them to be predictable. Again, they start on time, they end on time. I personally recommend strongly that you hold them every single month, at least when school is scheduled, regardless of whether or not you get a big attendance or not. I would even argue in favor of running them in December and over the summer. Now, a lot of people would say, no way. That's okay. The point is, they are predictable. They know if one parent shows up, they're going to see the head of school. The head of school is in Australia or sick. The bottom line is, they know at least the head of school is going to be there. It may be if there's a board of trustees, it could be there's always a trustee present, could be rotating. It could be there'll be teachers there, although I personally don't require teachers to come. They're members of a community and they can raise these issues just like anyone else. By the way, another way of thinking of it is that you have multiple stakeholder groups in a school. You've got the administrative group, which includes everyone in your office. You got the board or the owners of the school if it's not the same as the head of school. You got the faculty. You could argue the faculty is split up between the lead teachers and the assistants. And the specialist, like the art teacher, the phys ed teacher, I would argue it's just one faculty. Yeah, the parents, and you could argue the middle school parents are different from the toddler parents, and I would argue it's just parents. Um, and then you got students. So any group could be asked a question. So the community, which includes whoever's there, could ask a question of the students. Students, would you like XYZ? Or how do you feel about expanding to middle school or a high school or going co-ed next year or becoming a girls only school? Bottom line is you can ask a question of the administration, of the board, of the faculty, of the students, of the parents. Doesn't matter. By the way, grandparents may come to these meetings. All kinds of people come. Now, when the meeting is over, you want the note taker, the scribe, whatever you call that person, to prepare a written summary of what was discussed. These days, that's pretty easy with the various online note taker apps. I mean, if you're doing this either online or if you have a Zoom meeting running, you're going to get, if you've got a note taker app like many of us use, you're going to get a proper set of minutes right after the meeting is over. You want to send this out to the whole community. You also want to remind people of the meeting that is coming up so that you have the maximum opportunity to have strong and consistent participation. I want you to notice, for example, that these Tuesday meetings, we hold them whether or not no one shows up, one person shows up, or 100 people show up. And we always try to remind you. And I've changed the way I remind you from reminding you the day before, the day of the meeting, and then just before the meeting. Now I remind you a day in advance, and then I send it out just as the meeting is about to begin at 15 minutes before. But the idea is we're just reminding you what the topic is and that it's going to come, and that if you're signed up, you're going to get the recordings and any other resources. Now, you can do all kinds of things during the meeting. There is no wrong answer, whatever traditions work for your school. You can have folk music at Andrew Cutt's school. That's how they do it. You could reflect on how the last month has gone. You can ask them to share what led you into our school. You can ask them for acknowledgments, just like you might with children. Is there anyone in this group that you really want to thank for something that they've done that you really appreciate? There's no wrong answer, but develop whatever traditions work for your school. Now, one thing I would recommend is to use what we call the 9 areas of school operation. You may even have a chart in your school during these meetings and just say, here are 9 ways of thinking of our school. They are the educational program, which includes everything: summer camp, before school, after school, snack time, phys ed, art, Spanish class, anything at all. There's the faculty and staff, both who teaches and how do we get them and how do we pay them and how do we keep them and how do we thank them for what they do. There's anything at all connected with the faculty. There's money, because it takes money to run a school. You got to keep those nonprofits rolling in. And there's nothing wrong with the parents talking about money. They're paying a lot of tuition. They need to know where the money goes so they have confidence that your money isn't going down a rat hole. There's the facilities. And by the way, I always argue, don't just accept the school you've got today. Ask this question. It's 20 years from now and all the money problems got solved. What is your school like in each of these 9 areas? So we have, facilities, we've got recruiting of families and admissions, we've got building community, we've got, by the way, I see one of them is missing here is administration. I see I've got the word communication. For communication, let's call that leadership of the school. So how's the leadership work? Is there big enough leadership, or are you drowning in the office because just you and a secretary? What's going on? The governance, is the board, an asset, or is it a giant problem? Um, what does the group want to know? And then fundraising and capital. Where's the money coming from to build that new gym? So with this up in front of them, they can ask themselves, how are we doing in each of those 9 areas? Is there anything we want to ask? Anything we want to talk about? Anything we want to recommend? Anything we want to do in any of those 9 areas? Now, I would argue that one of the things that a school should be doing, whether you're accredited or not, is engaging in ongoing self-study. That's the idea that you get your parents, your students, your board, the whole school is engaged in asking, how are we doing in every one of those 9 areas? And I think that the community meeting is certainly not where all that work's going to be done. You're probably going to have committees and task forces and so forth, but it's a great place to get the average person kind of up to speed, or at least aware that these are things we're looking at as a school. And again, that tends to lead to a greater sense of confidence in the school. Now, again, the meetings have lots of structure. There's no wrong answer, but quite often we start by just introducing ourselves in case there's someone that doesn't know who's in the room. We have discussions that, are just a circle of equals. Again, we pick a topic and we talk. We have collaborative decision making, very much like Quaker meetings. And then as the meeting is coming, we reflect on how did this meeting go, what worked well, what we would like to do differently, and what are we grateful for. Now, there are a few key points in a year, and these are just examples. For example, at the beginning of the year, you may, like the Congress, say, this is for example, the Berry School was founded in 1932. So you can imagine at the beginning of the school year, they might say something like, this is the 96th or 97th year that we're beginning here. And this is what the community meeting is all about. And this is how we run it. And we're welcome. We're so glad you're all here. This is how it works. You're going to probably do routine business at least, in October through April. January, though, you're probably going to have some kind of special conversation for at least part of the meeting, talking about transitioning from one level of the school to the next, like moving up to middle school or high school or to elementary or whatever. And, you may have special events. You may have people break up into subgroups, like all the high school families go into this room, and somebody will explain how the high school works. So these are just high points in a year. Towards the end of the school year, you're probably going to be doing some things in the school, not just in the community meeting, but this will typically become part of a conversation. For example, probably in the month of May, if your school stops in June, you're going to have the kids who are ending one level of the school spend a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks in the next level of the school. Parents probably want to at least mention this, talk about it, appreciate it, acknowledge it. Our kids are growing up. I can't believe my little toddler is already going into high school. I have heard that so many times over my 50-some year career. Families, by the way, at this time, they are often doing reflection, like how their family has changed over the year, how their kids are growing up, what the year has brought. There'll also be typically feedback of how the school has changed, what is working really well, what do we want to accomplish next year, what do we think should be done differently next year. Again, what I'm trying to do is help schools to build a more reflective group process. because this builds stronger schools. There are lots of topics that you might talk about during a meeting. There's no wrong answer. For example, you can talk about parenting strategies. People may want to know about curriculum or program. You know, they may want to talk about Montessori philosophy or whatever your school's philosophy is. They may want to talk about the school culture. They could be concerned that the kids are becoming, uh, you know, interested in the other sex, or who knows what's going on in your school. The bottom line is, this is a group of parents and students. They talk about whatever interests them. And these are discussions that enable parents and teachers and students to share insights and experience and create a collaborative atmosphere. They're also providing an opportunity for people that join to voice their concerns, their opinions, to ask questions, ensuring that every voice is heard and acknowledged. Again, the purpose of running these meetings is to have connection, to encourage collaboration. And what do you get out of it? Well, you get a stronger school. You tend to get a more collaborative school. People are really working together. They know each other. You're getting better communication. You're getting a sense of buy-in and empowerment. You are getting a happier school, especially if you get the kids involved. And so the bottom line is, respectful dialogue fosters stronger community connections. And of course, we are trying to model kindness, positive language. We're trying to teach our parents, how do we behave to each other in the way that we're trying to teach the children to behave. And we are handling any disagreements between us with respectful conversation, actively listening, and openly talking about what's really on our minds without blame. And again, we are respecting people's privacy, and we're keeping the conversation constructive. We're not into yelling at each other and threatening each other. And so when you do this, whether it's 75% or 90%, these are made up numbers. The bottom line is, you're likely to see a real uptick in buy-in in the school community, especially among kids. Now, really, the conversations challenges are getting people to show up. Today's parent would rather watch the paint dry on the wall. You got to really work at it, find ways of getting people to engage. And so typically you do the best you can. You love people for where they are, and you just keep trying. Whoops. Again, best practice, you want to have clear agendas. You want to have active participation through a structured process. You really need to learn how we run a Montessori meeting, which, by the way, is what we use in board meetings, faculty meetings, and community meetings at the class level for the whole community. And that's a whole workshop in itself, if you're ever interested. You do have to have really good ground rules, and you have to regularly review, how are our meetings working? Is it working the way we want? So again, we just need to think, how can we actively engage people in the community meeting? How do we get them to show up, whether it's online or in person? What are the values you want people to look at? And how do you want to get people to give you feedback about how the meetings are working? And the whole idea is that we're better together. If we work together, we can build a better school. We can achieve great things for our children. And this is who we are. This is my personal cell phone. Feel free to contact me anytime. This is, and by the way, there is a Montessori Foundation number too. That'll get you to the main office. That works too. Please feel free anytime that I can help. That's what we're here for. And that ends this week's formal presentation. Any last words before we get off? Questions? Gratitude?
like you say, thank you. That's what put together a lot of ideas to float around.
Thank you, Don. Glenn, anything from you, sir?
No, I mean, this is definitely in your wheelhouse, and it's something that as we've been thinking about recently about just engaging families throughout the year, how to do that, having these types of community discussions. Um, Again, when I put my marketing hat on, I always think about how we can also tie this back to you know, word of mouth, right? When you have these types of engagements, I feel like it always helps reinforce the value proposition to the school or to the parents.
I would only say I have only known Barry and Newgate myself, and I've lived in the Montessori world, but I've known Catholic schools and Jewish day schools and Sidwell Friends and St. Albans and Georgetown, all kinds of schools. I would argue this works in any school. And
Yeah.
in so many schools, parents feel like if you don't give $100,000 to the school, your voice doesn't matter. You're just chopped liver. Whereas if you do this kind of meeting, it doesn't mean you don't have big donors and you don't love them for what they have done. But what you're trying to do is create a circle of equals where every single parent feels heard and honored, and every child feels heard and honored. And teaching kids how to participate in community in a respectful way is a great life lesson for them, whether they're Montessori students or not. This is something I think every school wants to teach. Okay, any last words? Hi, Jenny. I see you're unmuted.
No, this is a good wake up.
Well, glad to do it. And I'm glad that you do this at your school at the classroom level. And again, I think the classroom is the building block of any school. So if you only do that, you've already done the most important. There's just one more layer on top of it.
Yes, and to take that model and just implement it with parents should not be too bad.
It takes some training. They got to get used to it. But if you make it a tradition, then it becomes sort of like we always did it this way. Of course, this is how it's done. All right. So, for whatever it's worth, that's it for this week. On Thursday, we have Independent School Leaders Forum, and our guest is going to be Ben Thrash, the current headmaster of my alma mater, the school my family founded, the Berry School in Washington, D.C. And he is going to be talking about a new Montessori compatible alternative to the International Baccalaureate. So, for those of you that do middle school or high school, or just want to know what possibilities are evolving, you may want to join us. Ben's a good guy. He's going to be talking about some really interesting things with schools around the world that are involved in developing this new program. So that's it for this week. And we will let you know what Tuesday, next week's Finding the Perfect Match, is going to cover very, very soon in the week. So we'll be in touch later today or tomorrow with your video and your other resources, goodies from this week's session. Thank you all for joining
Thank
us.
you.
And by the way, for anyone that's interested, I'm about to run an open house for families that are interested in, excuse me, heads of schools who are interested in joining the Montessori Family Alliance and learning what we can do for your school. So, should anyone want to do that, all you need to do is let me know, and we'll be happy to have you join us either this week or we're doing them on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. We will talk to you later. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.